Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And you know what? I hope your life is good right now. Like, I hope that you look out your window and you see beautiful things. I hope that you think about the relationships that you have and that you've enjoyed, even relationships that have moved on, but that you enjoyed for a time. And what you see in that is something beautiful and redemptive and big picture. As we talked about last week, there's just a lot of people right now who are very invested for different reasons in making us feel like the world is burning down and everything is falling apart and we should be mad at everybody and we should feel insecure. And I don't think we need to feel that. I think there's a ton to be thankful for. I think that there are a ton of beautiful things happening in our lives even right now. And I think if for 1 second we just turn our attention away from the people who really, really need us to be mad about each other and mad about everything, we can see that stuff. And then we can come back to the things that might be actual problems with sobriety and clarity and deal with them, keep them in perspective. So I just hope those things are evident to you this time of year. I hope you've had time to reflect on that stuff, and I hope you experience points of encouragement and light and optimism this week. And I hope that one of the things that is writing a narrative into your life of encouragement and optimism is working on the book of Matthew together, because it's doing that for me. I get to be around this very old text about this fellow who came along and was like, it does not have to be like this. There is another way. And a whole lot of stuff has been done since then in his name and in the name of the church that he initiated. And yep, I get it. That can be complicated and that can be tricky. But my goodness, so much good has come out of it. And the stuff that I am seeing on these pages echoes across the centuries. And it's life-giving. It's other. And it's the kind of other that has the ability to reframe how we understand the world and relationships and life and death and aging and God and justice and injustice and all the questions that everybody ever has dealt with. And so the fact that you have made the time to hang out with me and to make this a priority, it means the world to me. Just the fact that we have this thing together forces me to be around this thing that I do believe is life-giving and other. So I know that's a lot, but just, I don't know, in case I don't say it enough, this is a time of year to express what we're thankful for. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful that we get to do this. I'm thankful for this document that we get to look at. I'm thankful for the God who I think is behind it. And I'm thankful to those of you who participate, even though you maybe don't believe there's any God behind this thing at all, but that it's just compelling and interesting. In that same spirit of gratitude and appreciation, there was a comment that came in last week on the subreddit, reddit.com/r/TMBH podcast. We have a little discussion thread over there, and every week a handful of people participate in it, and I appreciate the feedback there. The top comment this week was from somebody who goes by the handle Buckeye Smithy, and this was really cool. I want to give you some of the highlights. They write, I started listening to the podcast at episode 0001. Notice that extra zero. I mean, yeah, this is set up to go for the long haul. About 9 months ago, and I'm finally caught up. Okay, first of all, that is a huge achievement because I realize how much content on the book of Matthew, how many days we've spent doing that. This all is, and here you are caught up. So that's cool. I'm sorry that now you just get one a day. Today is the first day I listened to an episode on the day it was actually released. Very cool. Observations that I'm sure the rest of you are already aware of, but have interested me. Okay, first, to summarize, they're saying that the podcast is a good fit for what I set out to do originally on the YouTube channel, and that's the truth. I think this was probably always a better fit as an audio medium, so I think that's a fair observation. And moving all of the everyday deep dive Bible content over here to the podcast frees me up to go and explore other things on the YouTube channel. Next point from Buckeye Smithy, because I was playing catch up, I was listening at 1.2 speed, and that makes the music sound different because you're used to it at 1.2 speed. Okay. Well, I think 1.2 speed is about the right rate for my voice. I think that works pretty well. The music is really good at 1.0. I think you might always like it better there. This next point that Buckeye Smithy makes here, I think is a very astute observation, and I want to talk about it a little bit with where we go with the text for the rest of today, which we are getting to. They write, when you binge listen through the podcasts, it seems like Matt spends too much time recapping where we are and how we got there, especially the intros to the pick up right where we left off episodes. That's fair. But I think now that I'm only listening to one episode each morning, I will appreciate those recaps a lot more. Yes, Buckeye Smithy, you are exactly right. I have had to make a calculated decision. as to how much recap I want to do as we bounce from episode to episode. And to do that, part of what I'm taking into consideration is how I think most people in the history of the podcast are going to consume this. Well, the numbers I have in front of me says that the vast majority of people, at least to this point, have consumed it the way you have, playing catch up a little bit. So on the one hand, man, I guess I'm not being very considerate to the people who are playing catch up because, yeah, you do get a lot of recaps. On the other hand, I really want to reward the people who have been here from the beginning or who did all the work to catch up. But my thinking on that and my strategy for why we do so many of these little contextual resets and recaps is bigger than how I speculate people will consume the podcast here. The main point of my strategy is I really want you to understand Matthew, and I really want to understand Matthew. I don't want to move forward and get to a place where it's like, man, I don't really have any meaningful impression of what happened in the first 10 chapters, but I'm kind of clear on what happened in the last couple of chapters. Those resets and recaps are guardrails for two things. One, it's to keep me from just running off and speculating about whatever and just drenching this thing in my opinion, which is what happens when you start to venture away from historical and literary context. It just becomes too easy to look at this and be like, oh, well, what do these 5 sentences say? I got to fill 10 minutes here. Well, let's just say this, or this. Well, it's quite the opposite for me when I sit down to make an episode of this. And I have to think about it because we've agreed that those would be the ground rules of how we do this. I have to think about it in the context of the entire book of Matthew and indeed the context of the whole Bible as best as I'm able. I mean, it's a lot of book and I don't know all of it super well, but I do my best. So reason number one for all of the recaps is it keeps the guardrails on so that we're doing our best to encounter the text and interpret the text in light of, first and foremost, get ready for it, the text. The second reason that we do that is I want you to have Matthew in your hip pocket. I want you and I want me to actually retain this content. I want to be able to think, oh, what's the thing that happened in chapter 10 again? Oh, that's right. That's the missional discourse. So that's where we're going to get the shrewd as serpents, innocent as doves thing. Where is it that John the Baptist had the big question? Oh, well, naturally, that would be the very next chapter. That's got to be 11, right? And where did Jesus go and heal Peter's mother-in-law? Well, that was in Capernaum. And those were public miracles right after the Sermon on the Mount. So, it's got to be chapter 8. And I think if we're constantly taking those extra few seconds or even minutes sometimes to go and bounce around and just remind everybody and reset, this happened here, it connects with this here, we are far more likely to think holistically about this book and understand it as a block instead of understanding it as several individual little vignettes that might all have nice little life lessons attached to them, which is nice and that's great. But one of the opportunities that we are afforded by this medium, by this format, is that we actually have the chance here to move at the pace that we need to move. You're thinking like, well, yeah, and that pace is pretty glacial at times. And I would say yes, but how does a glacier move? It engulfs everything and it moves this whole giant block at once, adding to it as it slides along. And that's exactly what I want to accomplish here. I want this to be one book of the Bible that every single one of us can get to the end of this and be like, there are 65 others in there, and that's a lot to think about, and that is difficult, and I don't know, I feel a little overwhelmed by it, but I'm not overwhelmed by Matthew, and the main character of Matthew is unapologetically, overtly Jesus. That is one of our main sources for what we know about the kingdom and a relationship with God and all of the basic stuff that comes straight from the mouth of Jesus, his life, his words, his miracles, his actions, all of that stuff is right here. And you're smart. The further along we get, the more I need to reach out and grab as we move that glacier forward together to retain all of it and keep it all in front of us at once, to keep it all in our memory cache at once so that we have it all at our disposal so we can think about each verse and each passage in light of this whole robust book that we mentally have spread out in front of us in great detail. I think we're going to get so much more out of it that way. And if you're here, I guess that means that you like coming at it that way too, because I think it really does get us to a different place than just about any other medium or format allows us to get to with a book. as complex and important and with implications as great as the book of Matthew. So I want us to put ourselves in the shoes of the original audience, including the original people who actually witnessed these things and said these things. I want to try to understand and empathize with their assumptions so much better. And I want us all to be in a place where, as best as we can, we understand this document, or we take at least a really honest run at it. And then from there, I mean, what's the tagline of this podcast? It's the Bible without the sermon. From there, well, I guess we all just figure out how it makes sense for us to proceed as individual humans in response to what we understand about the document. Thank you, Buckeye Smithy, for the comment. Thank you, all of you, for being here. My intention at this episode was to do a grand overview, a glacial pace, like we're moving at, of the relationship and the deterioration of the relationship between the Pharisees and Jesus, to set us up for the beginning of chapter 23, as really the bridge is formally and officially burned. It's now public. There will be no going back and making nice and patching this thing up and finding a compromise way to move forward between the Jesus kingdom plan and the Pharisee religious plan. And you all been paying attention. You're attentive in general. You're going to notice this shift in tone. So to really understand what's going on in 23, I think we have to review how we got to this point in the relationship. And that, in the spirit of what we talked about today, is what we're going to do tomorrow. Again, I'm so thankful for all of you. I'm so thankful for this time together. And I hope this thing is one little drop of redemptiveness and optimism and connection with something bigger than ourselves for you each and every day that we get to do it. All right, that's plenty for now. Reviewing the Pharisee-Jesus relationship mañana. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.